let's talk about emotional flashbacks. So I have been professionally diagnosed with PTSD, and most of the time when I have a flashback, I have certain senses that I can feel from the trauma. So in other words, like when I'm having a flashback, I might be able to smell the environment that I was in during the time of a traumatic situation. I might be able to hear certain things that were said, or certain noises that were going on in the environment during a traumatic event, or I can visibly see what's going on. Sometimes it's all these senses at once. Sometimes it's one and not the other. Sometimes I could see what was happening during the trauma but not hear anything. Sometimes I can smell something that's happening during the trauma but not hear or see anything, stuff like that. But there's something called emotional flashbacks as well, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So an emotional flashback is when I can feel the emotions of a traumatic event, but I'm not necessarily having any of the other sensory outputs. I'm not necessarily seeing flashing images or seeing the traumatic event happen again, like in my mind. I'm not necessarily hearing or smelling anything from the traumatic memory. I'm just feeling the emotions of it. And it's very important to keep in mind that this is different than from other disorders. There are other mood disorders that can cause you to have mood swings and you get these intense emotions. There's things like BPD that can cause like intense mood swings, and these things are different because for an emotional flashback, it's specifically about trauma. There's a trauma trigger that triggers it, and the emotions that you're feeling are the emotions from the trauma because it's a type of flashback. An example of a very common emotional flashback I get is during certain times of the day when the trauma would happen, or like after the trauma would happen, or certain times of the year. I get these emotional flashbacks where I really, really, really feel like I need to talk to my mom and tell her something, and the feeling I get inside is like almost like really painful. It's really hard for me to describe, but I feel like I need to tell my mom something, and like it almost makes me cry because I so badly wish I could tell her. And I think I'm having, during these times, an emotional flashback to after my traumatic event where I wanted to tell her about the trauma but didn't know how to, didn't have the words. A lot of time when this would happen growing up, I would just keep saying I love you over and over again to her because I didn't have the words to say to her that like I was being abused and all the things I wanted to say to her. Another example is if there's a trauma trigger such as a man being very aggressive with me, it could trigger an emotional flashback where I feel the emotions felt during the abuse, where I feel helpless, I feel trapped, I just feel these emotions are just very intense and hard for me to personally explain, but I feel like the abuse is happening again. And it can trigger panic attacks. It can trigger like complete shutdowns. It can be really terrible to relive. And so I think that this video is really important to make because not all flashbacks are the same. Like I said, most of the time I do have some other element. Most of the time like I can see the memory in my head. Most of the time I can hear stuff or smell stuff from the traumatic memory, but sometimes it is just an emotional flashback, and it's really good to keep track of the specific patterns of when I'm starting to feel this stuff because it's usually during days and times that I was abused in the past. So for example, it might be very common for somebody to have flashbacks the time that they got home from school if they were abused at their house because the abuse might have happened when they got home from school. The last thing I want to say is please DM me or comment down below if you know any other good places for mental health communities and to make videos about mental health. I really don't like all the misinformation on TikTok. I don't like that statistically 80-something% of the mental health information on here is misinformation, and that for certain topics, some studies think that it's under 5%. If somebody was speaking to me and they told me that 80-something% of what they were telling me was false, and that for certain subjects, less than 5% of what they were telling me was false, I wouldn't want to listen to that person. I wouldn't believe them. And it's kind of the same way with TikTok, but I don't really know any other avenues. So if you do know anything, please DM me. Have a great day. Comment down below, like this video, follow me, and have a great day.